Joshua Harmon, a federal whistleblower, sued Trinity Industries in federal court, claiming the company committed fraud by changing the design of a popular guardrail and not telling federal officials. Now, last month, a Texas jury ruled in Harmon's favor, and Trinity was fined. The company stopped shipping those guardrails to states, and many states, including South Carolina, stopped installing them. Now, we've since learned thousands of them line the roads across our state, and the Dept. of Transportation has no idea where they are.
It was 1.5 inches.
With the help of a federal whistleblower, we found nearly a dozen of these controversial guardrails right here in the upstate.
These things has to be made exactly the way they were tested and approved.
But they weren't, according to Joshua Harmon, who has been installing these guardrails for years. He owns a company that competed with Trinity Industries, the maker of these newer guardrails.
The height of the channel is under 15 inches. The original 5-inch, when we found one, is 15.5 inches.
And this is the one that you say is causing a lot of problems on the road?
Yes.
Problems Harmon told the government about after he noticed subtle but crucial changes to the ET Plus guardrail, which went from 5 inches to 4. Harmon says the purpose of the 5-inch guardrail is to collapse like an accordion as it slows a crashing vehicle. Harmon says the newer 4-inch models did exactly the opposite. Instead of collapsing and bringing cars to a stop, the rail pierces the car and in some cases throws it back into traffic. Harmon also says Trinity knew about the problems and never said a word, not to the government and not to the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials.
They misrepresented that it was a tested product.
We asked the South Carolina Dept. of Transportation how many of these newer modified guardrails are on South Carolina roads. The DOT says there are about 3,700 in the state, but they don't know where they are because once a product is approved, they don't keep track of where it goes. So we went to a transportation industry conference last week in Charlotte to speak with Transportation Secretary Janet Oakley. Instead, we were directed to Chief Engineer Leland Colvin. Are you guys going to make some sort of effort to try to find out where these guardrails are so that if there is a product recall, it'll be easy to swap them out?
We're having those discussions as we speak. We have not made a final determination on what they will be. We have right now no indication in South Carolina of performance issues. It's not something that our Highway Patrol is any incident or accident reports, whether it's local law enforcement or state law enforcement when there's accidents, how that safety device performs.
According to court records, jurors saw crash test videos of the 4-inch guardrails conducted from 2005 to 2012. Harmon, who is now a government witness, testified at the trial, and he says these are the videos in question, and each of those tests failed. Colvin says he didn't know about the failed test. Right now, the state is waiting for the results of new independent testing and has no plans to remove the rails still guarding our roads.
We don't want to jump out there and put ourselves out there in front of other folks until the testing is complete. I think we're jumping to assumptions if we do that on what the test result may or may not be.
And that, Harmon says, is a dangerous decision.
I firmly believe that a product recall has to happen.
Virginia is the only state to do a voluntary recall. A spokesman for Trinity says independent testing is being conducted in San Antonio, Texas on the new 4-inch guardrails. Now, that testing should be complete by mid-January. Meanwhile, lawsuits are already being filed in several states saying Trinity's 4-inch guardrails caused severe injuries and death. Trinity was fined $175 million, and by law, Harmon, who is the whistleblower, would get a portion of that money. But he tells me as of now, he has not received any of it. Back to you. Trinity Industries agreed to have some of its guardrails tested after a federal jury ruled the company committed fraud when it changed the size of its guardrail. The company was supposed to get approval from federal and state officials first. Now, the original developer of the guardrail says the testing that's now going on is inadequate. You are looking at video released just last week of crash tests on the ET Plus guardrails. They're being done by the Southwest Research Institute in San Antonio, Texas, to see if the rails safely stop crashing cars or pierce through them like a spear. The tests are now under fire by a man who first designed the ET guardrail.
They're not testing the impact conditions that are generating the problems and producing the injuries and fatalities that we're seeing on the highways.
Trinity Industries of Dallas agreed to have the ET Plus rails tested after a whistleblower argued the company committed fraud when it changed the width of its guardrail from 5 inches to 4 inches back in 2005. Whistleblower Joshua Harmon claimed the small change caused it to lock up and spear through the car during a crash instead of collapsing and absorbing the impact. It was his case that went before the federal jury. Harmon is now listed as a plaintiff in a lawsuit filed by the state of Virginia, which is suing Trinity for fraud. Dr. Dean Sicking, who developed the original ET guardrail, is worried the test won't reflect what really happens during a crash.
What I would like to see happen is enough testing be done at this critical impact angle.
The angle Dr. Sicking is referencing is at a lower impact than what is now being tested. He wrote this letter to the Federal Highway Administration in October, stating specifically how the test should be done. Attorney Stephen Lawrence agrees.
The Federal Highway Administration is not following their own safety guidelines. That requires testing at critical impact points if you know one.
Lawrence represents 10 clients whom he says were either injured or killed by these shorter 4-inch guardrails.
The FHWA, the government is aware, and Trinity is aware that the ET Plus has a very major issue at a 5-degree impact, and they're not requiring that to be run.
We reached out to the Federal Highway Administration about this claim. In an email we asked, are the crash tests being conducted from all angles? FHWA never answered the question directly, but did write back, we have no concrete verifiable data from any party that accidents that may have occurred over the years are definitely connected to low-angle impacts. We went straight to Trinity Industries, which hired the testing company. A spokesman confirmed the lower impact testing won't be done. Lawrence is now meeting with State Dept.of Transportation leaders and showing them the differences between the 4-inch and 5-inch ET Plus terminals, which he pulled from a scrapyard.
The testing has been postponed until January 5th. Now, South Carolina's DOT is waiting for those test results. It tells me it has no plans to remove thousands of questionable guardrails from state roads and interstates. Now, we also asked the state attorney general if South Carolina will file a lawsuit against Trinity the way Virginia has right now. The AG has no plans to sue, although a spokesman says they are following the situation closely.